Questions. As some of you know, I've been working on this for a while, and I'd like to thank Mark Athicus from ISCA for pulling this together for us. Me and Mark have been working on this for about 6 months. It's not just a major issue that I've been thinking about. It affects coaches in all sports, not just swimming, but I felt that we need to take a lead on this. Swimming's always led on lots of things that we see out there. So no further ado, I'll hand it over to Steve.
Thanks, Barry. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Steve Indig. I'm a lawyer with Sport Law. We're a consulting company that works across the country in the amateur sports sector. The company's been around 32 years. I've been with it for going on 24. For me personally, sport has been everything. I was a swimmer, a competitive swimmer for a very long time, making it to the Olympic trials level and nationals, and back then at the CI level, now U Sport level. And then I coached for 12 years, and now my daughter is swimming. So swimming is a big part of my life, and has been since the age of 9. So I appreciate being here, and very much recognize what all of you do. Those of you who, again, aren't familiar with the company, you can check it out. It's sportlaw.ca. I'll post my email and the website at the end of the presentation. There's over 600 free blogs on the website, with respect to insurance, liability, negligence, waivers, code of conduct, you name it, we've written about it. So please take advantage of that. Barry called me a couple weeks ago about insurance and the understanding of insurance. And before I get into the insurance topic, I wanted to talk about, why do we need insurance? What are most of the claims related to, and how can we be proactive in a defense, really? I mean, we cannot stop somebody from suing us. I could walk out of today's presentation and I could sue Scott if I wanted to for anything that I want to make up and pay $75 and file the claim. And all of a sudden now I have a claim that I have to deal with. But what can I do to make sure I put myself in the best position to have a viable defense? And most liability claims are based on negligence. And negligence is a legal term for I should have done something, or I should have done something different, or I shouldn't have done it at all. But in order to be negligent, I have to say yes to these 4 questions. Do I owe a duty of care to that person? Am I responsible for them? Do I have to make sure they're safe? Am I, as a coach, am I a reasonable in acting as a parent in loci of their real parents? I'm going to come back to the standard. Was there actual harm or loss? So if I'm at your swim practice and I slip and fall off a block, and I get back up and I have a little scrape, but no broken bones or concussions, there's no damage. There has to be damage that can be compensated for financial gain in order to be negligent. And lastly, does all of it fit together? Does my breach of my duty, my breach of my standard, create that loss? And if the answer to one of these questions is no, even though there's damage, I'm not liable. So there's actually a case out in BC from the 90s where an individual was paralyzed playing the game of rugby. There was a scrum, the scrum collapsed, the young man broke his neck in the scrum, sued the coach, sued the club, sued the provincial sport body, and ended up being unsuccessful in the claim because it was deemed to be an inherent risk in that sport. The coach had properly supervised, properly trained the athlete to be in that situation. And unfortunately, it was just a really negative thing. So what happened in that case was the standard of care was not breached. So when I talk about in swimming, particularly, or in sport, even more generally, is do who do I owe a duty? To anyone who could be affected by my actions. And usually within sport, that's pretty black and white. Are coaches responsible for their athletes while they're in their care? The answer is yes. Is the club responsible for the participants, the host organization? So usually in a sports setting, to say, do I owe a duty of care? The answer is yes. So that one's usually pretty black and white. Of course, there are different scenarios, but it's all fact based. The one that I have the most control over is, did I breach my standard of care? And I want you to think about standard of care like a line. And if I can prove my conduct was in above that line, even though there's damage, even though there's injury, I'm not responsible for it because I've done everything reasonable to create a safe environment. So of course the question is the line 10 feet off the ground or 1 feet off the ground? And the way we figure that out is this 4-part test, these 4 standards. So number one, written rules. So Swim Canada, SwimBC, your club likely has some sort of policies in place, code of conduct, certification, screening. These become written standards. And from a lawyer's perspective, I love written standards. One, it gives me a pathway, but also number two, if I'm representing the plaintiff, oh, I see here, Mark, you're supposed to be police record checked, a vulnerable sector checked, 2 references checked. Did your club do that? No. Well, now I'm in breach of my written regulations, which would put me below that line because I haven't met the standards that I've set for myself. So I want to know about your written rules. And if you can't comply with them, you need to identify that and change it. The use of the words will and may carry a lot of weight. So if there is a will do police record checks, your club must do them. If it's we may do them, you don't, there's discretion there, but that ties into the next bullet point: unwritten, unpublished standards. What are trends in the industry? And I remember doing this at a Parks and Rec Ontario conference. It was all lifeguards. And I said, how many lifeguards do you have per number of kids in the pool? And I know there's variances the size of pool, but basically the numbers are all over the place: 1 to 10, 1 to 20, 1 to 30. And there was very difficult to figure out what the trend in the industry was. But I think from a swimming perspective, we probably know what is common sense and trends in the industry that we have to comply with. So following, understanding what other clubs are doing from a risk management perspective, an education perspective, a screening perspective is really important to know. I'll come back to case law. The fourth point is common sense. What does your intuition, your knowledge, your experience say? And I like to use this as an example. This was about a decade ago. A provincial sport executive director called me and said, "We're sending our U14 team to California for a competition. Do we need chaperones?" So I said to her, "Do you have kids?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "How old?" And she said, 14. And I said, "Perfect." And I said, "Well, would you send your daughter to California without a chaperone?" And of course, the answer was, no, I wouldn't. So common sense and intuition is really important. The case law with sport related, particularly coaching related cases, are twofold. There's 2 standards. What would a reasonable parent do in a similar circumstance? Or what would a reasonable coach do in a similar circumstance? So, as a parent, of course, the risk management, the responsibilities we have are higher than a coach. As a coach, I'm there to make sure you're safe, but to teach you how to swim and teach you how to swim fast. As a parent, I'm there to make sure you're happy, healthy, fed, well slept. And really, the way we describe that is, of course, based on age and experience within the sport. As they get progressively trained, they become more athletes than they do us babysitting them as a reasonable parent. So when you take these 4 things and you kind of apply them together, and think about it as a pendulum, does your conduct push you away from your standard of care or towards it? And it'll be fact based on the scenario you're presented with. So if your behavior is in that red components of the picture, that's when you call your insurance company and start writing a check. If you can prove your conduct is in that white area, even though there's damage, we have the ability to have a viable defense. This is something we can control to the best of our ability. So what I always like to recommend to organizations, be it directors, coaches, decision makers, ask these three questions. We're going to provincial championships in Victoria. What what can go wrong? I'm sure there's a very long list, and a lot of you will share a lot of good stories. But what can go wrong? And I'll be trivial and say, well, there's a kid with a bee allergy. It's in the spring. The bees are out. Okay, what's the likelihood that he's going to get or she's going to get stung? And then if she does get stung, what's the outcome? And what can I do to control it? And so if you ask those three questions, and I love board members doing this as they make decisions, is to say, okay, we're going to do this. What can go wrong? Can we if it does go wrong, how bad does it go wrong? And what can we do to control it? And if we start doing these three things, again, we will be proactive in our risk management to hopefully set ourselves up for success if there is a civil lawsuit, but also to create a defense with or without insurance. So, well, that didn't show up. That didn't show up very well. I'll fix that, Mark, for you. But there are three risk management transfer methods, and I don't know why you can't see the third one. But one is waivers. Okay, a lot of you have probably heard waivers aren't written paper; they're written on, and that's the answer to that. And any good legal comment is maybe. And the answer to maybe is, was it properly executed? Was it properly worded? Did it include the people and organizations you want to identify? And is it reasonable in the circumstances? So waivers are a great educational tool as well as a risk liability tool. Another form of risk transfer is contracts. So contracting it out to a third party, management, security, catering, transportation. We rent a bus. We don't want the responsibility of driving our team. And the last form of risk transfer is that of insurance. And that's a good segue into the reason Barry asked me to be here. Oh, there's the waiver stuff. Is insurance 101. Insurance, and we'll get into the nuances of the SwimBC policy that we've been able to provide a little review. So why does insurance matter in sport? It protects organizations, the directors, the volunteers, the coaches, and participants from litigation, from claims. They only respond in the case of a claim. The claim could be a civil suit, a human rights claim, a labor board issue, but there has to be a triggering event. And what's really important for me, in my opinion, with respect to insurance is one, we want to make sure it applies and that it reacts to a claim. But two, I'm not so worried necessarily about having to pay out millions of dollars. I mean, that is a possibility particularly when we talk about paraplegic accidents. But a majority of the claims that I see in sport aren't related to personal injury. Their selection, their human rights, their employment issues. So the payment is not necessarily millions of dollars, but I'll tell you what scares me: legal fees. You have to defend your civil action with a lawyer who's at $400 an hour, $600 an hour, $800 an hour, and that time goes up really, really, really quickly. So I want, and I know a lot of you on the call today are listening to this are professionals, meaning you're paid to provide your coaching services. When some of you might know her, I swam in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia for Ginny Smith, and Ginny was a volunteer for 40 freaking years and never got paid, but loved coaching swimming, and she did it forever and ever and ever. And I don't want any of you to be exposed, either paid or unpaid, to unnecessary liability for trying to give back to a sport we all love. So insurance is key. The other thing that some of you, just to throw it in as we talk about it, is if those of you working for a club that's not incorporated or registered as a society, that is something that you definitely want to look into. The law recognizes two things: people and corporations. So if I'm a people working for a corporation, I'm in that circle. If I'm a working for an unincorporated entity, then it's on my shoulders personally. So I like that extra protection of the corporate shield, which again is very economical to ascertain. And actually, I had a conversation with a client this morning where she had mentioned some of their clubs in their province that aren't incorporated. And I asked why, and she said, well, they thought it was expensive and it was an administrative burden. And I promise you that the administrative burden, or the $55 it costs to register a not for profit, is be better than paying the $800 an hour for a civil defense claim. So I love it for that purpose. A lot of times, insurance is required by your municipality, your facility, your governing body. It's a key component to risk management. And even though you might not be liable, it is required, in my opinion, to defend something in court. So, what are the common risks that we see? Of course, there's the broken bones, the concussions, the slip and falls. But again, what I see in my side of the shop is more related to decision making, selection. So and so didn't make the Olympic team, didn't make the national team. So and so was kicked out of their club. Discipline related matters. On governance, and I shake my head constantly on this, is this happens all the time where two different entities are arguing that they're the board of the organization. In Nova Scotia, about a couple years ago, and a client of ours did not file their bylaws with the ministry for 20 years. And somebody went and pulled the bylaws from 20 years ago, called a board meeting in accordance with those bylaws, and then claimed to be the board of a multiple $100,000, if not multi-million dollar PSO. Again, litigation for unnecessary purposes. So governance issues, termination of membership, travel, hosting, facility risk, equipment damages, general liability, complaints, maltreatment, code of conduct violations, employment decisions, termination, human rights. A couple years ago, I had a client. They had multiple staff, and the female staff was pregnant and tells her boss, "Hey, I wanted to let you know I'm pregnant." And the response from the boss was, "Oh, not you too," and that cost $14,000 in settlement fees. There was a swim coach's decision recently where a swim coach told an athlete they were too old and a girl and can't be in that group. That cost $12,000 in legal fees to manage that complaint. So, a lot of times, understanding the importance of insurance, yes, is it necessary for those slip and fall personal injury related matters? Yes. But it extends beyond that. It extends to a lot of the decisions that we make as coaches or as organizations that become subject to some sort of discipline or civil liability matter before a tribunal. So again, I want protection in those matters. Now, fundamentals of insurance is super, super important. And I do a lot of this work. And a lot of times when I do this type of work, the insurance broker goes first. And then I come in and I go and do a risk management session or some other legal topic. And what happens in those insurance presentations, I see it all the time. Are we covered? Are we covered? And the broker says yes. And the broker says yes. And the real answer is maybe. And the reason it is maybe is because you have to read the 40-page insurance policy that says when, who is covered, what is covered, and when is it covered. So usually, and this is not, I want to be clear here, this slide is not related to the SwimBC policy. This was just something that I had from a previous slide. We're going to get into the nuances of the SwimBC policy in a second, but usually who's covered, we want to see members, registrants, athletes, coaches, officials, directors, officers, employees, and this is an interesting one, contractors. Now, some of the coaches in BC are likely paid as contractors and not as employees. So we had a client here in Ontario, their business model was training. They would go around the country basically certifying people. I'll say NCCP, it wasn't NCCP, but just to give you an idea of what they did, I would hire Scott. Scott would go to Alberta, run a session on who cares what, and I would pay him a contractor's fee of doing that. Well, after 18 years of doing this this client read their insurance policy, and you know what was excluded? Contractors. So all those contractors who were out working on their behalf all over the country running these sessions were not provided insurance coverage through their provincial sport body, who of course they thought was covered. Another important understanding is what is covered. And the word here is always sanctioned activities. Okay, sanctioned activities. Well, who gets to sanction them? What is sanctioned? Normally, um, I've seen it very narrow and I've seen it very broad. Here in Ontario, Ontario Cycling used to cover sanctioned rides. And what would happen is Barry and I would go for a ride, just the two of us on a Sunday, and one of us would fall off our bikes and we'd make a claim. But even though Barry and I were members of Ontario Cycling, we weren't necessarily on to sanctioned ride. So Ontario Cycling then said, okay, we're getting way too many claims about individuals going on personal rides and hurting themselves. We're going to sanction them. And what they did was they would say, you have to apply and tell us the time you would ride. And so clubs would send in their sanctioning and it would say, we're going to go on a ride Sunday from 9 to 12. Well, what would happen is 9 o'clock, it's raining. What do? They go to Starbucks and they get a coffee for an hour, and now their ride goes from noon to 3. Well, that's not sanctioned because it was too specific. So they've been very up and down on how to figure out their sanctioning. But understanding what is and what isn't sanctioned is very important. And I will say, practices, your dry land training, your competition, particularly in Canada, will be sanctioned by an underlying premise. What's not sanctioned? Travel outside of Canada, fundraisers, year-end parties, theme nights, carnival nights. We had a client a couple years ago. Um, it was a soccer club. Two soccer clubs decided to have an exhibition game on a Sunday, and the two clubs met at one of their home fields and played, and a girl got kicked in the face and her tooth fell out, and she wanted to access the accident insurance coverage of the provincial sport body, and they call the sport body, and the insurance company says, well, was it sanctioned? And the answer was no. It was basically two coaches just decided to unilaterally get together and play a game. So even though it was a couple $1,000 dental bill, it was still a couple $1,000 dental bill that could have been easily facilitated by getting sanctioning. Fundamentally, when is there coverage? With registered participants during a supervised sanctioned activity. That's the fundamental rule in insurance. So there's multiple types of insurance. There's commercial general liability. That's the slip and fall stuff, bodily injury, property damage. It includes your legal defense costs. Typically, we're seeing $2 to $5 million of coverage per occurrence. Again, per occurrence is really important rather than a cap on the policy. Sometimes the insurance policy will say, we will pay out a maximum of $5 million over a yearly period. Well, if you have 10 claims of $10 million, you're not going to have coverage. There's directors and officers insurance that protects board members and other people making decisions. Usually, again, it covers management decisions. It's not included in your standard general liability policy, but it's an add-on that a lot of times a PSO does not provide. So you'd have to go outside of your PSO and buy it individually. A lot of times, if they're smart, the PSO's broker will reach out to the clubs and offer this as a rider, as an add-on. So really important that we understand what kinds of insurance that we have. There's accident insurance. Again, this is limited medical and dental coverage for participants. And again, read the small print, secondary to your health insurance, right? Doesn't replace liability. This is more for physio, dentists, osteopath. And again, I'll walk you through the SwimBC coverage on that. And then lastly, I think there's two more. Abuse coverage is an exclusion. Or sorry, this is another type of insurance. Covers allegations of abuse or misconduct. It's often mandated by PSOs and NSOs in today's environment. And of course, it's tied to safe sport compliance. This is something that is very expensive. I've actually had clients who have had it who have had some claims and the premiums were far too expensive. They decided to risk it, but it's definitely something to have a conversation about, to say, how much does this cost? What does it cover? Who does it cover? When is it covered? And is it worth pursuing? Other common coverages: property and equipment, crime, cyber, data protection. So those are all the different types of insurance. So I want to get into the SwimBC program, and I want to be clear here. I was able to summarize this information into I have it right here in front of me, a SwimBC insurance program FAQ. So I have not had the opportunity to review the 40-page policy. I have done it on behalf of other clients. Some of you will laugh about this, but we talk about the importance of exclusions. So I read the 40-page policy for a client, and I turned to page 40, and it said exclusions. This policy does not apply to sporting activities. So I called the client and I said, hey, don't read the first 39 pages. I just want you to turn to page 40. And she looks at it and she sighed and she said, I'll call you back. So again, understanding the scope of coverage and the exclusions is really, really, really important. Barry, do you want to talk a little bit about that document?
I think that the big issue, as we spoke about it a little while ago, is, and I'm loving what you're talking about at the moment, and I think it makes it easier for us to grasp. But the big issue is, I asked about 2 years ago, can I see the full package? The 40-page thing is you mentioned. We have still not seen that 40-page. And the reason we wanted the 40-page, just like what you've mentioned, Steve, we wanted to see where the gaps are, not just the gaps for the coaches and the volunteers, but where are the gaps? And we kept getting told, you can't see the 40-page, you can't keep seeing the 40-page. Yeah. Then when I went to the insurance companies, I go, who governs you guys? And they said, well, Canada governs it, and we have to send you the full package within 48 hours so we can negotiate the deal. And it's the fine print, the fine print that we don't know. And then it also comes with, in for some of the coaches, is it a conflict of interest? It always seems to be from a PSO's level that the PSO looks after the general sport, but the coaches, maybe the volunteers are a hat on, like they don't really matter. And that's why I brought it up. So we still haven't seen, we can't get that 40-page thing. So I've been going out, getting insurance package, and the insurance people saying, what are you missing? I go, I don't know what we're missing because
Right.
I've never seen it. So it's
Yeah.
Steve, can I ask a question about the nuts and bolts of that?
Yeah, for sure.
I think, are you referring to this FAQ document here?
Yes.
So I'll just echo what's in the chat box and what Barry has said, but in the very fine print, right under the header of this FAQ, which is out of focus,
Yeah.
it says reference must be made to the actual terms and conditions of the applicable policy forms, insuring agreements, policy wordings, limits, limitations, conditions, and exclusions. And I'm a volunteer and a swim parent and have been involved in swimming for over 20 years. And my personal battle with masters swimming in BC is that they will simply not provide a copy of that actual terms agreement. So I think my question is everybody talking about the same thing? We have an FAQ and some guidelines that are finally available on the website. They weren't last year. But when each of us respectively has asked for a copy of the details of the policies, we're either deflected or we're ghosted in some way.
I don't have the answer for that, Scott. And Barry, and even, Rod said it's 175 pages in the chat, not 40. And just to be clear, I just made up 40 pages. It could be whatever, could be whatever it is. I don't understand, to be honest with you, why it wouldn't be disclosed. I don't understand. So look, full transparency, we do work with SwimBC, so I have to be a little careful about, conflict and things like that. But, generically, and I would say the same thing to them, I don't understand why that information wouldn't be shared. I don't get it. So I'm not sure the mechanism in which how you would get it, but I do think it is an important piece to understand as we're having this conversation, because like I said, and I've seen it 25 times when we sit in these sessions with brokers and everybody just asks the same thing: are we covered, are we covered, are we covered? And they always say yes, and I say maybe, because it really depends on the exclusions and who's making the claim and when did it occur and all those things. So I would keep pushing, honestly, and if they're saying no, I would ask for a reason. I'm not sure what it would be.
Okay.
Rod, I don't know if you were able to hear that, but the number 40 pages, I just made that up. So if it is 175, so be it. So let's go over what we could find out from
Thank
that
you.
document. Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's
I
go.
mean, I think Barry will agree on that. That the reason they give is because the insurance companies told them they're not allowed to give it out, which seems highly odd.
I don't disagree, Rod. Like I said, having an understanding of what coverage you all have as clubs and coaches, I think is paramount. And if there's a gap there, I want to know about it. And in order to do that, and like again, I think Scott read it out. And when I look at the, SwimBC insurance FAQ, CGL exclusions, virus, bacteria, disease, liquor, beer gardens, not an exhaustive list. Okay, well, what else is in it? Because I need to know whether I can have a bottle drive on Sunday or go to the park because we have a day off in who cares where, right? Like what's involved. So I think transparency is important. Let's start with an overview. Applies to sanctioned swim activities within Canada. This is really important. Again, I have lots of stories that I'd like to share. A couple years ago, National Sport sent their national team to Buffalo to train. So just across the border here in Ontario, not a long drive. Went to train in Buffalo. A kid tore his ACL. They went to the medical insurance that they never bought, and it was a $150,000 bill to the NSO for not having adequate medical coverage for their athletes while they traveled. So understanding the variance between Canada and the United States or outside of the States is really important. It applies to registered members within the scope of the policy. Again, scope of the policy, what's that scope? And we're going to try and make some educated guesses here. And again, understanding that coverage, as you've all alluded to, is key to understanding gaps that might exist. So from a general liability perspective, you have a $5 million commercial liability, covers bodily injury, property damages, and includes participant to participant liability. So if there is a incident between two swimmers, looks like there would be coverage. There's dental up to $1,000, medical expenses up to $10,000. Again, read the fine print within Canada. And if you're outside of your province or territory, then you may get a bill. There's physio, chiro, osteopath, $100 per visit, up to $500. Rehab benefits, $3,000. This one I found interesting. Emergency transportation, $50. I don't really know what the average cost of an ambulance is, but I have to guess it's more than $50. And any eyeglass or contact damage up to $100. So, I think this is a fairly, based on my experience, standard coverage. The $5 million is what we tend to see these days. Some higher risk sports like gymnastics or maybe the martial arts are going a little bit higher, but this is a pretty standard amount in my opinion. So who's insured? Directors, managers, coaches, trainers, officials, employees, volunteers, acting within the scope of their duties on behalf of the club. Now I'm testing you all. What's missing from that list?
liability insurance for coaches.
Well, coaches are listed, Barry, but is it an
Contractors.
employee or a contractor? Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you're a contractor, again, are you being provided coverage of this policy? And the answer that I have is I don't know.
Yeah.
What activities are covered? Sanctioned or authorized events by SwimBC or related training authorized by the club. And I'm actually working with a swim club here in Ontario. They have a space that they want to sublet as a gym. They want to allow people to come work out. And right now they're having a very challenging time getting insurance coverage for that outside event, which is interesting because they're very adamant that, of course, it's outside the sanctioned activities of Swim Ontario, which I would agree with. But why is it so complicated? Anyway, that's my next project, probably this afternoon.
Steve,
And it,
Steve, is
yeah,
the
go ahead,
sorry.
Scott. No, go.
Is there a kind of a legal standard for that authorization process?
You know
You
what?
alluded to it already, but at a club, community club level, we've discussed this, and do we need to have it on paper somewhere? Do we need to, have a board meeting about it?
I mean, what I like to see, what I actually created for mostly at the provincial level rather than the club level, Scott, is I've created a sanctioning policy. And what we say is the following are pre-sanctioned activities. You don't need to ask us to come to train, to do dry land, to do tubing, to do stretching, to do competition. But if you want to go to the States, that's a sanction request. If you want to do a bottle drive on Sunday, that's a sanction request. So I've tried to help PSOs from that perspective educate themselves. They could share that with the insurance company, share that with the clubs, and you'll go, okay, we're doing a bottle drive on Sunday or a car wash. Oh, I've got to call SwimBC and get a sanction because that's outside the pre-sanctioned activities. So I do like to see that. And again, I agree with you, Scott, and the language that's in that our FAQ. Yeah, there's a little bit to our imagination, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. It comes up for us for polar bear swims, Christmas parties, and the other one was we did some fundraising for the local Dancing with the Stars fundraiser for another organization, but we were the designated drivers. So we volunteered to drive inebriated people home, between 11 p.m. and 3 in the morning. And we never thought about what
I
our
would say those three things you just listed would not be covered. I think all of those would be outside the scope of the policy. That's funny that you mentioned that. What was the program called?
It was a Dancing with the Stars fundraiser, right? So, but they made a lot of money off the open bar, so we agreed to be the DDs, and it didn't come up until 3 or 4 years later that
there could be a
didn't have
gap
any
there.
coverage for our swim club members.
When I was at I swam at Dalhousie a long time ago, and I ran a program. It was a national program called Operation Red Nose, and we would do the same thing. We would go around, pick up drunk people during Christmas and New Year's, and drive them home. We made a lot of money doing it. I couldn't tell you if we had adequate insurance.
Could
Did
those
that Red
be
Deer
covered
too.
under a pre-sanctioned declaration at the beginning of the season?
Well, I think it has to come from SwimBC.
SwimBC.
Yeah.
And are they receptive to that sort of thing? Anybody know? If we call them up every once a week and we say, all these different clubs, community organizations saying we want a sanction, do they ask questions? Do they rubber stamp it? It becomes kind of a bureaucratic nightmare when I think about it.
Well, I think what's important in those examples, Scott, is again, SwimBC understanding the components of the policy. So we'll get to the exclusions in a second. I don't think a lot of that would be covered under the policy in the first place, right? So we'll get there. Let's see if we get there. What if
You
a
answer
coach?
that.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask the question. Re-ask the question. You're going to answer.
Yeah, if a coach is not an employee or a contracted, what's the question, Rod?
So where it says, if you scroll back down there, who's covered, it says coaches, and it also says employees. So is a coach not either an employee or a contractor? What else could they be?
Well, they'd be, I mean, the third option would be a volunteer, but that's included as well. I
Mhm.
agree with you. Like, it is very possible to make the argument to say, well, they're a coach. It doesn't matter how they're remunerated, therefore the
Right.
policy applies. But I
Yeah.
can't give you, and you can't get that answer without seeing the policy.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, The accident insurance, again, third-party payer of medical insurance within Canada only after provincial health care and other benefits that are paid out. There is dental, medical, rehab, emergency transport. So there is accident coverage. Here's some of the exclusions. So this is a new one. Thank you, COVID, virus, bacteria, contagions. So that's liquor. So they're back to you, Scott. Liquor liability, beer gardens, concessions. That, so anything involving alcohol and a claim relating to alcohol wouldn't be covered. Non-coverage for non-Canadian residents. So, some of you are probably hosting meets and people from Seattle are coming up to participate. If they would have no protection under the SwimBC policy, they'd be completely on their own. A lot of times I have seen organizations request proof of medical insurance while they're here. Of course, there's no coverage for criminal activity. You cannot try into the insurance policy to try and defend your theft or fraud or whatever it happens to be. And then I'm going to pick on Rod a little bit here. Professional athletes are excluded, and some of you might be coaching professional athletes. I was at the World Cup event here in Toronto a couple weeks ago, and Josh from Nyack, I think, walked away with $40,000-$50,000 after a very good couple days. That would likely make him a professional athlete. So I think, again, having them understand their insurance needs is super important as well. So traveling out of country considerations, the general liability does not extend outside of Canada. You need separate approval for international activities. Emergency travel, medical insurance must be purchased separate. So again, those of you traveling to the States, one, you should be going to SwimBC and letting them know, and then purchasing the adequate medical coverage while you're down there.
I have a question on that, Steve.
Sure, go ahead.
So currently, SwimBC, if you say, well, I'm going to, particularly in the US, but I'm going to a training camp in the US, they will want to charge you $60 to provide proof of insurance, which is essentially just a form they send to whoever you want them to send it to. And so, some clubs have been charged like $200 or $300 for providing this coverage. But so you're saying that if an American comes to a meet here, they're not covered under the Canadian sport insurance. But if we go to a meet in the US, is that the same, or do you know?
Yeah, it's the same.
Right.
So
So
the
how?
insurance coverage provided by SwimBC does not extend to American, we'll pick on the Americans in Canada
Right.
and Canadians in America.
Okay. So we should be covered because SwimBC is saying that there's proof of insurance here, but they're asking also sometimes for proof of insurance for the facility, or the facility is asking for proof of insurance from us, right? And so does like we we need travel insurance, but as a swimmer and a swim coach, if I take a group of kids to California, is SwimBC not like, does that coverage not cover us because we're there?
Right. Play that out, Rod. And unfortunately, I'm not sure I know the answer, but if I'm on your team and we go to LA for a training camp and you tell me to do something that leads to my injury and I sue you for an incident that occurred in LA, that's a question that needs answering, right?
Mm-hmm. Because they
Because
seem
based
to
on,
say
go ahead.
that, like, if they're going to provide proof of insurance, we need to pay money. So if I'm paying for money for somebody to see my proof of insurance, surely the insuring body or SwimBC must know whether we're covered or not.
Well,
they're
I think
charging.
what's being requested is what's called the status certificate of insurance. So that's a very
Mhm.
common practice. I know some insurers actually provide a portal where you can go in and get them yourself and just say, can I get a status certificate?
Mhm.
Sounds like they're charging you to get the status certificate. That, in my opinion, has absolutely nothing to do with whether you have coverage or not. It's saying SwimBC, aka Victoria Swim Club, has an insurance policy, period.
Mhm.
Whether Rod Barrett is covered for a liability claim in LA, you know my answer to that.
Mhm.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know my son plays baseball at a high level. We went down to Arizona last year, and the organizer mandated that we had to provide medical insurance prior to being allowed to be on the plane.
Mhm.
But I don't know what they had from a general liability perspective. Yeah. But actually, maybe it's a good segue, Rod. And I know there's a couple other questions here. We'll try to get to them before the hour's over. But, if you're approved by SwimBC for out of province travel, again, this is taken from the FAQ. There's no accident and coverage. There's no medical. There's no D&O. There's no property. There's no theme parks. There's no hotel. There's no vehicle. So what's left? I don't
Mhm.
know. I'm not sure.
Mhm.
Hosting, visiting, or international teams. Visiting teams must there you go. Visiting teams must provide proof of their own general liability, their own medical insurance, and failure to verify can create serious liability exposure. So again, I don't know if this is a SwimBC concern or a host, a club host. If you're having teams from the States come up, who's ensuring this occurs? I don't know the answer to that. But again, I like it from an educational perspective. I like it from an insurance perspective. Whether it's happening or not, I don't know the answer to that.
Mhm.
What if I get a claim? Contact SwimBC immediately. Don't wait. Be proactive. Contact upon receipt or threat. Give them notice. Again, sometimes in the fine print of your policy, it may be you must give us notice of 30 days of knowledge, or 30 days of intent, or 30 days of threat. What do insurance companies like? They like to keep their premiums. What do insurance companies not like? They don't like to pay out. So I'll share a personal story with all of you. Our company, for the first time in 33 years, was served with litigation papers a couple months ago, and we submitted it to our insurer, and we got a letter back saying we've reviewed the claim. We believe it falls under the terms of the policy and will be providing you coverage. Whew, great, because if they had said no, I would be defending a litigation claim by myself in Alberta. I'm in Toronto. Not convenient. So what I'm trying to say to all of you is don't give the insurance company an opportunity to fall into the fine print and say, well, you submitted it too late. We don't have to provide coverage. If you do have coverage, they will provide legal defense costs and help you defend it. Please keep all your records relating to a claim. Most litigation claims in Canada are based on a 2-year statute of limitations. Okay, ready for the kicker? From date of discovery of the injury, not the date of the accident. So if I get, I'll pick on Scott again. If I'm with you, Scott, and I fall off your blocks and I bonk my head, and I don't discover for a year and a half that I have brain problems, my timeline starts from the date the doctor tells me I have that, not from the date I fell off the block. So if there are records, keep them, PDF them. If you use waivers, PDF them, keep them forever. I mean, in today's technology environment, your entire office can be on, this is my AirPods, but you know what I mean, on a USB key. So save this stuff in case you need it. We had a client, this is a really good important story. We had a client reach out to us a couple months ago saying, we have a claim from 1985. somebody filed a claim related to an incident in 1985. And you know what applies in 1985? The insurance policy that was purchased in 1985. So the insurer of today said, not our problem. We're insuring you for 2025, 26. We're not insuring you for incidents that occurred in 1985. And we were able to track back the insurance company, I'm no word of a lie, to 1986. I could get it to 1986. I couldn't find the Manulife, Markel, Lloyd's. I couldn't figure out the 1985 coverage. So if you do have the ability to track a note somewhere to say coverage in 2025 was through SBC, 2026 was through Lloyd's of London, just make a little note of that. So if there's a historical claim, you'll be able to do that. Key takeaways from today. Obviously, insurance is super, super important. Try to understand to the best of your ability what is covered, what's excluded. Confirm your insurance requirements before traveling or hosting. And, here's my contact information. If anybody wants to have a discussion, they don't feel comfortable in a public setting, by all means, pop me an email or give me a phone call or whatever. I have sent Mark this PowerPoint. Mark, obviously, send it out, do whatever you want with it. And I know I haven't provided a lot of the answers that probably everybody was looking for, but I could only prepare today also based on the information that I had available to me. So thank you for your time.
Steve, before you go,
Yeah, not running away.
yeah, it's Barry. Just one question. In the letter I got back from SwimBC, and this was the discussion how it started, is that the head of SwimBC now states that we should have professional liability. Could you just touch on that before we go? Because that is out there. Some of the coaches think SwimBC is going to pick up that cost. I don't see that in the package, because what's happened in the last 2 years or 3 years, SwimBC's taken some cases on, and the coach has been left. Get your own lawyer, get your own insurance, but it's too late then.
Yeah, I mean, professional liability is, again, it's for decisions or conduct that occurs within your course of being a professional. So, do I recommend it? Sure. You know, maybe it's something you negotiate into your employment agreement with your club. I really don't know, Barry. I would say a lot of people are not probably buying it. I don't have an insight of the cost of it. But again, I want to know the gaps in my SwimBC policy. And then if I feel there's value in buying it as a rider for myself, and again, I hear you. Look, we can spend another 2 hours talking about safe sport complaints and the sword that's occurring. The sword that it's being used as right now is a big one. So I don't even know if you can get insurance coverage to cover you for that kind of conduct, particularly if you're found guilty, but it is definitely worth a query into looking into. Yeah, right now, as I say in sport, but we'll pick on the coaches because you're all here, but we always say people in sport are guilty until proven innocent. And unfortunately, that's a bit of the model that exists in today's environment. So yeah, Barry, for sure, I would look into it, but I first and foremost really, really want to understand what coverage I have and what coverage I don't have. I can tell you that in the FAQ by SwimBC, you'll see there's nothing in here about maltreatment or conduct complaints, which means that you're probably left to your own accord.
Okay. Steve, I'd like to say thank you for taking the time. I know you're very, very busy. And I'd like to thank everybody that's joined. Mark, have you got any comments before we leave?
Yeah, I can make this next slide show the presentation. So if you click, you want those slides, it's a PDF, 2 megabytes. It's well done. Thank you so much, Steve.
Impressive,
Okay.
Mark. I'm impressed. Yeah, my pleasure, everybody. Happy to be here, and thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Steve. Everybody else.
All right, he's checked off.
Thanks, Scott.
Well, Barry,
It's like Scott. This is Mark.
hi, Mark.
Mark's one of the key people on the International Swim Coaches Association and WASCA, and college coaches. It's what I expected. We can't get any answers, and I'm wondering whether I should take time out when I go to Victoria to see if I can get a meeting with the Minister of Sport, because it's not just swimming; it's all sports and it's all clubs, right?
Yeah.
The professional liability. When I get an email back from SwimBC, I would suggest you all get it. Was an indication we're not covered in that part at all, right? But you've been battling. Scott's been battling for ages from a master's point, getting information, and it's sort of when you hear the top lawyer in the country say we can't understand why we can't get it, then it's a major issue. But it's. I think he explained everything very, very good. I'd like another session with him on just liability, because some of the coaches don't understand. The Safe Sport is coming up with so many new rules, and Mark's got the same problem in the States. Like, one of the comments that just came up the other week was, you're responsible now for what the child eats while they're away at a meet. And I go, no, that's not my responsibility. That's the parent's responsibility. And we're seeing coaches leave the sport just because they're getting hassled by parents, right? Well, when you put the kid in the wrong event, all this. Scott's a surgeon, so he's coming back from it from a swimming point. He's well insured.
You know, Barry, I will mention to you, and Mark, for what it's worth to you, we get the regular newsletter from MSABC. Now, the master swimmers in the province used to be independent, and about 10 years ago, maybe a little longer, they were folded into SwimBC. And the idea was that it would provide, or it would minimize the duplication of resources and allow us access to the technology for scheduling meets and publishing meet packages and accessing results. But it just hasn't really worked out. SwimBC is more focused on high performance and age group swimming, and those things are all legitimate, but they just don't really have it in their heart to solve masters issues, and insurance is one of them. But I got the newsletter a couple of weeks ago, Barry. I don't know if you know this, but the lead article was that SwimBC informed the MSABC that they were exploring ways to sever ties with masters swimming. And I don't know what's driving that. And maybe there's an insurance piece or not. But it just kind of came out of the blue, and the article concluded we're just waiting for more information. So I don't think that will affect you as an age group coach, but it's interesting that we're kind of coming full circle, that we integrated with SwimBC and now we're maybe exegrating from SwimBC.
Yeah. I think the same thing happened, didn't it, Scott, with Swim Ontario and Ontario Masters, over different things. But
the other thing I wanted to ask Steve, which is also kind of important to understanding the lay of the land and the ethical approach taken by insurance companies on these fine print issues, is where's the transparency? I've repeatedly asked for just a summary of how many claims are made by covered individuals and entities in a given year, and how many of those claims are actually paid. Don't need to know any details, but because the policies are so oblique in many cases, because we can't get a copy of the 40 or 175 page detailed document, because insurance companies are very good at taking our money, but they're even better at wading through the details of all the hoops that we're supposed to jump through and then don't. You know, the reporting policy for an incident here is egregious, I would say. Reporting to the club in 72 hours, having a club official sign off, submitting it to SwimBC within 30 days. They submit to the insurance company. We have to fill in all the forms. Nobody else does the work. It's all work absorbed by the club. And then it gets sent to an office in Ontario where they're quite at liberty to say, oh, you submitted that initial form 96 hours after the incident. And then the discussion just stops.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been very interested. We've had a couple major incidents that I've been indirectly involved in. Chlorine leaks in pools.
Yeah.
You know, we had a major kind of abuse charge scandal, and I feel sure that claims got filed, and I would just like to know and get the organization to provide us in their end of the year annual report insurance claims. There were 4.
Yeah.
They were all denied, or there were 7. They were all denied, or there were 22 and we accepted 1. Does that seem like a reasonable request?
It's the same thing. I get to the point when I started this is it me reading things wrong, right? But then when I spoke to Steve a few weeks ago, he's going, why can't you get the package? Rod's been asking for the package. It's not just me. He's the head of the coaches. It's like, no, you can't have the package. And Rod's saying it's the insurance company, but I'm being told by the insurance company they have to give you the full package. And SwimBC can say, hey, we don't have to give you the full package because it's our insurance. And you're going, no, we're under your thing, right? What don't you understand here? It's my life. It's my program. I'm responsible for those millions of things that we still don't know we're responsible for now.
And I say, wouldn't it be interesting if they're not giving us the policy, which I think at some level must be illegal.
Yeah.
But we're paying into it, and then there's never any settlements. Like they never cover anything because we don't know what's covered and what's not. They do. And they can easily find exclusions, deny claims, and our premiums keep going up when there's never any payouts. That's my basic question. I don't mean to sound like a conspiracy theorist here, but I am not aware, after 20 some years of swimming in BC, of anybody who's had an event where a claim was filed and it was actually covered. I mean, in a way, that's good. Maybe there's just not that much activity, but I happen to know of a few cases where there have been. So I'm also just interested in the transparency, and that's not a insurer's issue, really. It's us holding SwimBC or NSABC's feet to the fire and saying we deserve to have this information. And I think the idea is that we'll just hold them a little bit more accountable. And if they keep coming back to us year after year and saying, well, 6 claims, no coverage, 18 claims, no coverage, then at some level we can say, what are we getting for this? Non-policy, this policy that you won't let us read.
And I think I think I'm going to have to make that next step, and sit down with somebody in the provincial government and just say, this is crazy. They made 1.7 million profit, that small insurance company, last year, and I think they're breaking all the rules. It just doesn't make sense that we don't have the package. Even Rod's getting frustrated. They class us as coaches or consultants. That from the insurance companies that I'm dealing with, that's okay. That's a quick fix. But the issue is, for me, on these 5 or 6 cases that came up where parent against the coach or a coach against the coach, SwimBC always goes whichever the way, and they never cover the coach, ever cover the coach. It's like, he didn't say, but Steve was on about, we had one guy charged $40,000 in legal fees this year, and that case is still going on, and SwimBC didn't help at all. And you're going, okay, what is not covered on here of the coaches? That's it. Like, hey, the coach didn't check that when an athlete comes in, and they touched on it a little bit. An athlete comes from the States and swims in the meet and he gets injured. SwimBC is basically saying none of you are covered if that happens. And that's a huge cost. It is not a $50 cost. You know that, right? It's not a $50 cost. It's a lot of money cost. And we need to be prepared for that stuff. And we can't be prepared if we don't see the fine print.
Well, I think going from here, my only strategy is to just go back to MSABC, tell them that we participated in an insurance seminar with a firm from Ontario in sport law, demand that we see the policy, somehow work my way up to the top to find some, the thing is that nobody in MSABC has any idea about the policy. I am sure I am the only one in master swimming that has asked any questions about this. So that means we have to kind of elevate into SwimBC. But now there's the specter that SwimBC may, at some point in the near future, say, oh, you guys are on your own, presumably for the fall of 2026. In which case, MSABC will have to reorganize and go through all the same steps in order to just sponsor master swimming separate, and still hold competitions, do all the things they used to do.
But you got a big issue then in that group of 18 to 25. Some of them go back and forth, right, between both
Right.
But some of them swim masters and then go to swim at nationals or age group championships.
Yeah.
Because it goes 18 and over.
Yeah.
So thank you for taking the time out, Scott.
Well, it's an ongoing battle, so.
So, Scott, you don't want to do the same steps because you'll just end up in the same space. You got to do different steps, right? It might be good to make a petition, a very hard-hitting, short. We would love the undersign of the petition to see the insurance coverage that has been denied, transparency or something, really hard-hitting, powerful, short, and then go out and get, 100 or 500 or 1,000 people to sign that. The other suggestion might be to get a newspaper, daily sports journalist to write an article about this. And, you sort of leverage and putting people's feet to the fire. You got to create some fire.
Yeah. Or we send a letter from a lawyer. And we had to do that before with SwimBC when they were holding money back from the coaches. They said it was their money. And we say, no, you took it on behalf of us. You have to pay it. And they wouldn't do anything when we went back with emails and stuff. So finally, we paid for a lawyer, write the letter up. We have a demand, right? This is it. And that could actually be masters and clubs together, Scott, and probably have more weight if it goes that way, just like what Mark had said. And
just start to rally the troops and raise awareness. And of course the masters are going to be a great ally because the adults are going to sign the petition. The kids, you don't know. What are you asking my kid to do? Of course they're parents, but I think the masters people would want to know, and they can just click on a web page and add their name to the list.
Yeah, I think you're quite right, and especially about the part of media involvement. We've considered this before, that you know, there's CBC, and we know some of the reporters who live in our town, and I guess we've just kind of been hoping that because this is so obvious, right, that if you're paying for an insurance policy, you get to see the policy, that SwimBC would wake up, but they're not. So
Yeah, sometimes you have to push people to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And boy, this article is going to really embarrass you. You know, okay, you win.
yeah, okay. Well, thanks, guys. I got to
Good
move
luck, good luck.
along, but Barry,
Thanks,
we'll see
Scott.
you in town.
Yeah, I'll see you later.
Thanks for organizing, Mark.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, what do you think?
Well, yeah, it's solid stuff. We didn't get into any of the how to educate people, but I think I think a petition might make good sense.
Mm-hmm.
And just because then when people sign the petition, you're going to get their name and email, and you're going to start this snowball effect. Say, hey, we want to see the insurance policy.
It's just crazy.
We've been asking since this date, and we still don't have anything. And we want to get some supplemental insurance because we know that things are. Yeah, I guess you could tell that story without it being in the petition, but
Yeah.
we, the undersigned, want to see the petition because we go to the pool.
Yeah, and I'll talk to Rod. It was nice to have Rod and Mark. You know, we had 3 coaches there, or 4 coaches that have got kids on the junior national team or the national team there, and they're concerned about it. And there's such gray areas now. You know, like I find that emergency thing $50, and you're going like, what the heck? You know, I'm sorry. You know, that wouldn't get the kid to the hospital. The bill's going to be huge. And we see it all the time. Kids having asthma attacks, kids having chlorine attacks. It's just, it's just the norm. But then we have to get to the point of making some action. And I think we've done everything we can now. I've got a price. We'll put that out fairly soon, because a lot of the stuff they're saying they're not covered doesn't affect the coaches. It's just you made the wrong decision, and the only way you're covered on the wrong decision is if you have professional liability. And going, yeah, I've got it. So can you have a look?
You've been very polite in trying to get this information, and you need the information. So it's time for them to shit or get off the pot.
Yeah, it is.
And if you're not going to do it, then we're gonna come after you until we get it.
Yeah, and Rod's got enough. Well, the group's got enough money to pay for a lawyer, right, to write a letter. That's not a problem. And I think we got to stop. The way I look at it, the longer we don't have the thing, the more chance that the opportunity is something's going to go wrong, and go, why did you not do that? And then we'll find ourselves in a bigger hole, right? Well, you sat on it for 2 years, Barry. Why the hell didn't you do anything? And I don't want to get into that, because there's also an issue. Who knew we didn't have insurance? And that's another question, right? Because that might go back, like what they said, it might go back 2 years. Hey, well, if this coach had known he didn't have insurance, he would have got insurance. Maybe he wouldn't. But their lawyers can come back now and say, hey, you knew all the new rules that were coming out. Why didn't you do anything? And we're all on the same page. And I think maybe we do need a little survey to put together and just say, we need you, like tick this box, like where you're on. I can bring it up again this weekend when we go to the meet. Do you think we go this way, this way, this way? We've asked enough times. Do we get a lawyer? Do we send one letter and we all sign it, right? All these coaches have signed it. That we need the package. Not maybe then we go to the next step and ask all the presidents to sign. You need the package, because they're in the they're responsible in a lot of these issues, and they're volunteers, and that's the problem, right? Lots of times the coaches like myself, Barry, can you deal with this? Because we can't put people on meetings like today. They're all working. We don't have the time. So you actually go, was it our job? And go, well, if I don't do it, it doesn't get done. But that's the same in the US too, right? It's a big problem. Thanks.
Well,
Mark.
I do like the petition idea because that is a government thing that and then you can say we're going to make legislation because of this, or
Yes.
you can change a board policy because of this, or
Yeah.
you can. And if people see some numbers, then that's organized people, and that sometimes becomes more powerful.
Yes. And I think it's two ways. Like you said, this is about education. This is about, hey, we can access the top lawyer in the country. We have power. We have contacts. It's not like we're just trying to pull it out of a box or an air. Oh, I think it's this. We're going, we need to do this now. And maybe the letter or the survey, are you all ready to do this? Right? You're ready to do this. We're going to send a letter to them saying we need that. And at the same time, we need to check and, with our local MPs or whatever, and just say, if I have to go further on this, what do you think? Should it go to a lawyer first, just a letter? We've asked multiple times. And we know by right, we should be getting the stuff. We got 48 hours or whatever to get it. And then if not, I don't mind meeting in Victoria. I've always found when I've gone to Victoria, shit happens. But it happens even better. Like you've said, if we have, who do you represent? Well, we got 300 signatures here ready to go. And it's all sports. Just think about it. They're all under the same insurance package. It's millions of kids. It's millions of like even Scots.
And that point about the coaches are guilty until proven innocent, but there was an article that I just read about this weekend. Water polo coach at the University of Florida, and there was a claim made, a Title IX claim, and I'll send you the link. It didn't get raised to the level of being a Title IX claim. However, he got fired, dismissed from here and here, and didn't know why until this came out, and then that got wiped away. Now the claim has no merit, but he's still without a job. And he was like an IT professional as well as a low paid club coach. So when something goes sideways, the blowback on the coach is really devastating. And it's hard
and on his family, Mark, and on the family, right? And
you
I
easily
found
fix it.
on your friends and your peers, right? They go, whoa, I've been doing that for years, right? Nobody told me, right? And I think
so
the issue,
it's bad.
It's bad, right? And for the lawyer to say, hey, you guys are guilty until it's proven innocent, right? You're going to, not a good profession to be in.
Right.
Right? Not a good.
Right. And okay, well, let's get insurance. So it makes logical steps. That's our solution. But we can't find out what this is. So we're not going to lose situation here.
Yeah.
Let's get us out of that. Okay. Well,
We'll get it out. Mark, always appreciate the effort and work. Okay.
Okay.
It's going good.
All right.
All right. Thanks.
Take care.
Okay. I will.
Thanks for listening. But before you go, I wanted to say that this is an ongoing conversation that's going to be documented at two different places. One is within a course at read.swimISCA.org. That's part of the learning management system of the International Swim Coaches Association. The other place is our podcast called Heavy or Not. We hope that you subscribe to the podcast and follow along. There's a website, hon.lap.red. You could sign up there and stay abreast as to what's happening in this saga.